When I arrived at my wedding in my bridal gown, I found an octagonal fighting ring set up in the center of the stage. My fiance, Hale, was holding the hand of his girl bro, Chloe Shaw. With a smile, he handed me a pair of boxing gloves and explained, "Vivian, this is a tradition from my hometown. The bride has to get into the ring and wrestle one of the groomsmen for good luck." I asked Chloe to go up. "Just play along for a minute." Looking at Chloe, who was always acting frail and sickly, I did not think much of it and stepped straight into the ring. But the next second, she threw an extremely professional spinning kick and knocked me unconscious with a severe concussion on the spot. When I woke up, I was paralyzed in a hospital bed. Derek stood there holding Chloe's hand and said to me, "Our relatives and friends gave us so much wedding money. The wedding can't go on without a bride. Chloe is willing to take care of me in your place. You're so kind, Vivian. You won't mind, right?" Under the torture of humiliation and severe depression, I pushed my wheelchair off the rooftop of our wedding home. When I opened my eyes again, I was back 1 month before the wedding. I turned around and knocked on the door of a national-level kickboxing champion training base. "Coach, if I train for a month, can I punch someone's head open?" The coach looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my thin arms and legs for 3 seconds before he snorted. "Punch someone's head open? With that little frame? One slap, and someone could send you flying." I did not say a word. I took a stack of cash from my bag and slapped it on the table. $50,000. 2 years of private savings. The coach pushed the money back with contempt. "I don't need pocket change." But when I rolled up my sleeves and showed him the bruises Derek had left on me after getting drunk, the coach calmly picked up the liability waiver on the table and pushed it toward me. "Sign this. If anything happens during training, the base takes no responsibility, including but not limited to fractures, concussions, and internal bleeding." I grabbed the pen and signed my name without hesitation. The coach put away the waiver, and the joking expression on his face disappeared instantly. "Fine. Starting today, I will train you at the intensity of a professional kickboxer before retirement. I don't know whether you will be able to punch someone's head open in a month, but I guarantee I will train you until you want to smash your own." On the first day, the sparring partner threw me 47 times. Every time my back slammed into the mat, images from my previous life flashed before my eyes. Chloe's spinning kick knocking me unconscious. When I woke again, I was paralyzed in a hospital bed, tubes running through my body. Derek stood at the foot of the bed holding Chloe's hand, wearing a troubled expression. "Vivian, our relatives and friends gave us so much wedding money. The wedding can't go on without a bride. Chloe is willing to take care of me for you. You're so kind. You won't mind, right?" Would I not mind? On the 3rd day after I became paralyzed, he married Chloe. He used my money and lived in my house. Everyone praised Derek for being loyal and responsible. Everyone praised Chloe for being kind and virtuous. Not a single person asked whether the bride who had been kicked into a severe concussion and left paralyzed from the waist down could still bear to live. Thinking of all that, I climbed up from the mat and beckoned to the sparring partner. Again. The sparring partner looked at the coach. The coach nodded. "Go." That night, I lay on the hard plank bed in the training base dormitory. There was not a single part of my body that did not hurt. My phone screen lit up. Derek had sent a message. "Honey, I just finished working overtime and finally got dinner. I'm watching everything with the wedding company. So just relax and wait to be the most beautiful bride." I stared at the words "working overtime" and opened my social feed. 3 minutes earlier, Chloe had posted something. It was a selfie of her in a wedding dress. In the background, on the arm of a sofa, was a dark blue Hermes tie. It was the birthday gift I had given Derek last month. Her caption had only one line. "Only the favored get the privilege of trying on the dress." I tightened my grip on the phone, opened Derek's chat, and replied with a voice message. "Honey, thank you for working so hard. I'll leave everything with the wedding company to you. I trust you completely." Then I typed another message. "By the way, honey, I saw a limited edition couture wedding dress. Only 3 in the world. The deposit is $200,000. What do you think? Isn't that a little too expensive? An ordinary dress would look good too. But I will only get married once in this life. And didn't you say you would give me the grandest wedding in the city?" He was silent for almost 2 minutes. Finally, he sent one word. "Fine." The corner of my mouth twitched. I turned off the phone and rolled over to face the wall. "Derek Hale. In my last life, you wanted my money, my house, and my life. In this life, I will drain you first." During the day at the office, I discussed wedding dress styles with my coworkers, sampled wedding cakes, and played the part of a blissful bride flawlessly. After work, I threw myself into the boxing gym. Protective gear on. Gloves on. 1 second, I was calling him honey on chat. The next, I was gritting my teeth and counting strikes against a heavy bag. At my request, the coach designed a specific defense and counter routine against spinning kicks. "You said your opponent is good at spinning kicks?" "Yes." "What level?" "Underground Fight Club sparring background." The coach frowned. People from underground rings use dirty leg techniques. They don't follow official rules. They aim for vital spots. He pulled up a clip from an underground fight. See that? Before they kick, their hips tuck in for a split second. Very fast. Less than 0.3 seconds. What you need to do is shift sideways within that 0.3 seconds, bleed off the force, then close in and strike at short range. I nodded and practiced it over and over. When I cornered a 6-foot man against the wall, he instinctively covered his groin. The coach cursed him for being useless, but I saw the corner of his mouth lift slightly. That night, my best friend Sophie came to pick me up from the gym. When she saw the bruises all over my arms, her eyes reddened immediately. Vivian, are you crazy? Why are you torturing yourself like this? I took off my gear, opened a bottle of water, and drank 2 mouthfuls. Look at what I found. I handed her my phone. On the screen were transaction records sent by the private investigator. Derek's online loan, $83,000. Of that, $62,000 had been spent on a Cartier bracelet. Recipient, Chloe Shaw. Sophie's eyes went wide. That bastard took out online loans to buy Cartier for that woman? What has he ever bought you? On your birthday, he gave you a $9 bouquet of baby's breath with free shipping. Call off the wedding, Vivian. Do not marry him. I shook my head and took back the phone. That is exactly why I can't call it off. I need him to kneel and spit out everything he swallowed. Sophie looked at me, and the look in her eyes changed. Vivian, I don't know exactly what you are planning, but whatever it is, I am on your side. I watched her leave, then bent down and kept hitting the bag. 3 nights before the wedding, the investigator sent me the final recording. It had been recorded inside Derek's car. Chloe's voice came through. Derek, after the wedding day, she will be ruined. That house under her name was paid in full, right? Once it is transferred to you, we can move in together. How perfect would that be? Derek laughed. What's the rush? Once I get her house, then transfer out her savings, that will make this marriage worth it. Chloe giggled. Derek, you are so bad. Do you like it? I love it. The recording ended there. I sat on the bench in the gym locker room and listened to it 3 times. My hands were steady enough to back it up to 3 different cloud drives without a single mistake. Then I transferred the remaining payment to the investigator and added a note. Excellent work, worth every cent. 2 days before the wedding, Derek's mother came to my door. She carried a bag of discounted supermarket fruit, sat down on my sofa, crossed her legs, and started giving orders. Vivian, Mom wants to discuss something with you. That wedding home of yours was bought before marriage and paid in full, right? Once you and Derek are married, you will be family. A family home looks strange if it is under only one person's name. Add Derek's name to the deed. Relatives and friends will see it and think you two have such a good relationship. I held my cup of tea and said nothing. Chloe said it too. A good woman should never divide things so clearly with her man. Be generous, and you will be blessed in the future. How wonderful. Chloe said it too. An outsider was deciding my affairs, and this future mother-in-law thought it was perfectly reasonable. I took a deep breath and forced out an obedient smile. You're right, Mom. Give me the property deed. I'll go to the county recorder's office tomorrow and handle it. Her face bloomed with joy. She pulled the deed out of her bag and handed it over. Of course. She had even brought the deed with her, just waiting for me to say yes. I took the deed and saw her out. The moment I closed the door, the smile vanished from my face. I took the deed straight to an agency. Not to add his name, but to mortgage the property. The house was worth $3,800,000. I took out a loan of $2,600,000 against it. The money arrived that day, and I transferred all of it into an account under Sophie's name. In my last life, after Derek transferred the house to himself, he sold it and did not give me a cent. In this life, he would not touch a single steel bar in it. When I got home, Derek was unexpectedly in the kitchen. He brought me a bowl of black soup. Honey, you have not looked well these past 2 days. I made you calming soup. Drink it and sleep well tonight. The day after tomorrow, you will be the most beautiful bride. I took the bowl. A medicinal smell hidden under something sweet rose from it. In my previous life, he had used this exact bowl of soup to make me sleep for 10 full hours on the night before the wedding, giving Chloe enough time to turn the wedding stage into a fighting ring. I lifted the bowl to my lips and pretended to drink. The moment he turned away, I spat it into a tissue, clenched it in my palm, and stuffed it into my pocket. Honey, it tastes good. Thank you. A flash of satisfaction crossed Derek's eyes. Then go to bed early. We still have the rehearsal tomorrow. He took his jacket and left the bedroom, then went into the guest room and shut the door to make a call. I pressed myself against the wall and heard 2 lines. Chloe, she drank it. She is sleeping like the dead. What happens the day after tomorrow is guaranteed. Chloe's voice came from the phone. Derek, when she gets in the ring that day, should I kick her left temple first or her right? Derek laughed. Whichever makes you happy. Either way, after the kick, she will spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. I went back to the bedroom and locked the door. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop and organized all the evidence I had collected into a timeline presentation. The title was, The Groom's Record. I set the program to play on a timer and linked it to the account for the wedding venue's main screen. After doing all of that, I lay down and closed my eyes. No, I was a blade drawn from its sheath. On the wedding day, at 6 in the morning, Sophie arrived right on time to help me with makeup. She unpacked the limited couture wedding dress worth $200,000, held it up against me, and her hands trembled. Vivian, your arms. The dress was strapless, exposing everything below my collarbones. The muscle lines along my inner forearms were clearly visible. Stop looking. Put on thicker concealer. Sophie bit her lip and asked no more. She applied 3 layers of concealer, barely covering the bruises. Once the dress and veil were on, I turned halfway in front of the mirror. The woman in the mirror stood in white, her train trailing behind her. She looked nothing like the useless woman who a month ago had been kicked hard enough to crack her skull and end up paralyzed in a wheelchair. The Vivian Lane from my previous life had already fallen from the rooftop and died. The one who came back was someone who had crawled out of hell. At 8 sharp, the wedding car arrived downstairs. Derek wore a tailored black suit and stood beside the car door waiting for me. His cheeks were clean-shaven, his shoes polished bright. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. I smiled, took his arm, and got into the car. Chloe sat in the front passenger seat. She wore a bridesmaid dress, her hair in a low ponytail, with light makeup on her face. When she saw me get in, she turned back and forced out a weak smile. Vivian, you look so beautiful today. Then she covered her mouth and coughed twice. I smiled and squeezed her hand. Thank you for helping today, Chloe. Your health is not good, yet you still agreed to be my bridesmaid. It is no trouble. Being able to witness your happiness makes me happier than anyone. Derek glanced at Chloe through the rearview mirror. Chloe looked back at him. The exchange lasted less than a second, but I saw the smugness, excitement, and impatience in it clearly. The wedding car drove all the way to the Grand Marriott Hotel, the most luxurious hotel in the city. Floral arches, red carpet, flower stands from guests lined both sides. Derek got out first, circled to my side, opened the door, and bent slightly in a gentlemanly gesture. Honey, we are here. I lifted my skirt and stepped out, then took his arm. We passed through the corridor and pushed open the banquet hall doors. All the guests turned at once, applause roaring through the room. I swept my gaze across the venue. The flowers, lighting, tables, and chairs were exactly the same as the wedding plan. Only in the center of the stage, where the champagne tower should have been, stood an octagonal fighting ring. Protective ropes surrounded the ring. Thick blue wrestling mats covered the floor. On the metal stand at the side hung 2 brand new pairs of boxing gloves. I pretended to be surprised. What is this? Derek patted the back of my hand lightly, his tone natural. Don't be nervous, Vivian. It is a tradition from my hometown. The bride has to get into the ring and wrestle one of the groomsmen for good luck. It is just for fun. He stepped aside, and Chloe walked out from behind him. She wore a sports jacket over her bridesmaid dress and carried a pair of gloves. Her face still had that same weak expression, and her voice was soft. Vivian, Derek insisted I go up. I could not refuse. Don't worry. My health is so bad I don't even have the strength of one of your fingers. We will just go through the motions. The relatives and friends below had no idea what was really going on, and started cheering along. Go on. Follow the custom. Bride, don't be shy. Get some good luck. Chloe is so thin a gust of wind could knock her over. What are you afraid of? The cheers rose wave after wave. Everyone laughed. Everyone made noise. Not one person thought there was anything wrong. Just like in my previous life. I was silent for 10 full seconds. Then I raised my head and looked into Derek's eyes. I can fight. Derek froze. I paused, then continued. But I have one condition. If any accident happens in the ring, no one blames anyone else. We sign a waiver. I took a prepared document from Sophie and laid it open in front of Derek. Black words on white paper. Every clause clear. During the ring sparring session, any physical injury caused by either party shall be fully borne by the injured party. The other party shall owe no compensation and shall not be held legally responsible. Derek lowered his head and scanned it twice. He could not stop the corner of his mouth from lifting. To him, I was digging my own grave. Chloe's eyes lit up. She snatched the pen and signed her name. After she signed, I turned and handed the document to Sophie for safekeeping. Then, in front of more than 300 guests waiting to see me make a fool of myself, I slowly took off the wedding dress and the dozens of pounds of protective padding beneath it. The heavy satin train of the $200,000 couture gown slid off. My shoulders, pooling on the polished wooden floor of the stage like a dying white swan. Sophie stepped forward, her hands steady as she untied the intricate corset. Laces at my back. Underneath the heavy, multi-layered dress, I was not wearing the delicate lace bridal lingerie Derek's mother had picked out for me. I was wearing my black, tight-fitting kickboxing tank top and compression shorts. A collective gasp rippled through the 300 guests in the banquet hall. What is on her arms? Look at her shoulders. Are those bruises? The thick concealer Sophie had applied in 3 layers was gone now, rubbed off by the heavy fabric of the gown. My bare shoulders and forearms were exposed to the harsh, bright spotlights of the stage, covered in deep purple, green, and yellow contusions, the hard, lean muscle lines beneath them showing with a terrifying, athletic clarity. I looked like a soldier standing in the middle of a flower garden. I stepped out of the white heap of satin, walked over to the metal stand at the side of the octagonal ring, and picked up the red leather boxing gloves. I slid my hands in, my movements slow, deliberate, and entirely calm. Sophie, I said, not looking back. Lace them tight. On it, Sophie whispered, her fingers pulling the laces with a force that made the leather groan. Across the ring, Chloe's weak, sickly expression had completely vanished. She stood in her bridesmaid dress, her eyes scanning my bruised arms with a flicker of genuine surprise, but she quickly smoothed her expression into a smug, mocking sneer. Vivian, Chloe chuckled, stepping over the protective ropes into the ring with an easy, fluid agility. You've been working out? How cute. But a month of fitness classes won't save you from a real fighter. She reached for the blue gloves on the stand, her movements loose and professional. Derek, she called out over her shoulder, her voice dropping back into that sweet, high-pitched drawl. Are you sure we should do this? What if I accidentally bruise her face? The photos won't look good. Derek stood at the edge of the ring, his hands in his pockets, his chin tilted up with his usual arrogant, controlling composure. Don't worry about it, Chloe, Derek laughed, his eyes locking onto my bruised shoulders with a cold, satisfied gleam. It's just for fun. Vivian's a good sport. She won't mind. I looked at Derek, then at Chloe. The silence in my head was beautiful. The high-pitched ringing of my previous life's concussion was gone, replaced by a quiet, rhythmic thud of my own pulse. Let's begin, I said. The referee, one of Derek's groomsmen, a tall man who looked slightly uncomfortable in his tight suit, stepped into the center of the blue mat. All right, ladies, he said, looking at our cuffed hands. Keep it clean. No headbutts, no groin strikes. Touch gloves and come out fighting. Chloe did not touch my gloves. She stood in her corner, her body dropping into a low, loose stance that belonged entirely to the underground fight rings of the city's outer districts. Her shoulders were relaxed, her chin tucked behind her lead shoulder, her eyes cold and analytical. Fight! The referee yelled, stepping back. Chloe moved instantly. She didn't try to play the frail best friend anymore. She closed the distance. With 3 rapid, light steps, her lead left hand throwing 2 testing jabs toward my forehead. Left. Right. I didn't try to block them. I shifted my head slightly to the left, letting the wind of her gloves brush past my ear, my hands held high in a tight, protective guard. Wow. She actually dodged them. A groomsman at the side of the ring muttered, his beer cup stopping halfway to his mouth. Chloe's eyes narrowed. You've got some reflexes, Vivian. But let's see if your legs can keep up. She took a half step back, her body weight shifting to her rear leg. What's it here, hips? In my mind, the coach's voice echoed with a sharp, mechanical clarity. Before they kick, their hips tuck in for a split second. Less than 0.3 seconds. There it was. A tiny, almost imperceptible tuck of her left hip. Chloe's body spun like a top. Her right leg launched into the air, her heel tracing a high, vicious arc directly toward my left temple, the exact kick that had cracked my skull and left me paralyzed in my previous life. But this time, I wasn't standing there like a sheep waiting for the slaughter. Within that 0.3 of a second, I shifted my body weight entirely to my right foot, dropping my head beneath the path of her heel. The wind of her kick whistled over my hair, the force of it so strong it rattled my veil lying on the floor. Chloe's balance was thrown off by the empty swing. Her back was turned to me for a fraction of a second. Now, the coach's voice roared in my memories. I closed the distance. I didn't throw a long, theatrical punch. I stepped inside her guard, my left hand delivering a short, brutal hook directly to her exposed floating ribs on the right side. Crack. The sound of her rib cage giving way was loud, a sharp, dry snap that carried clearly through the silent banquet hall. Arg! Chloe let out a high, strangled shriek of pain, her body collapsing sideways. But before she could hit the mat, I grabbed her sports jacket with my left hand, pulling her back up, and delivered a devastating, short-range right hand straight to her left temple. The exact spot. The exact force. Chloe's eyes went completely wide, her pupils contracting into tiny pinpricks. Before rolling back into her head, she hit the blue mat with a heavy, wet thud, her body twitching once before going completely limp. The silence in the Grand Marriott's banquet hall was so absolute you could hear the soft, steady hum of the air conditioning system, The 300 guests stood frozen, their mouths open, their glasses of champagne stopping in midair. The relatives who had been cheering for good luck stared at the unconscious bridesmaid lying on the blue mat, her nose bleeding onto the clean, white canvas. Chloe! Derek's scream was a high, desperate shriek. He threw himself over the protective ropes, his polished leather shoes slipping on the canvas as he rushed to her side. He fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he cradled her head. Chloe! Wake up! Chloe! He turned his head to glare at me, his face twisted into a mask of pure, vicious fury. Vivian! Are you out of your mind? You killed her. You broke her ribs. I stood in my corner, my gloves held loose at my sides, my breathing steady and deep. My heart rate was a calm 72 beats per minute. It was an accident, Derek, I said, my voice quiet, flat, and entirely neutral. You said it yourself. The ring sparring is just for fun. And didn't Chloe say? She had the strength of only one of my fingers. You crazy bitch. Derek roared, reaching for the metal stand to pull himself up. I'll have you arrested. I'll have the police throw you into a cell. For the rest of your life. I don't think so, Derek, I said. I gestured to Sophie, who was standing at the edge of the ring. Sophie reached into her pocket, pulled out the signed liability waiver and held it up to the cameras of the reporters who had already rushed forward. Black words on white paper, Mr. Hale, Sophie said, her voice loud and clear. Every clause is legally binding. Your girl bro signed it himself before the match. Any physical injury caused during the ring sparring is fully borne by the injured party. Before Derek could speak, the massive, 300-inch LED screen behind the stage suddenly flickered. The romantic wedding slideshow, the one showing our childhood photos and our trips together, was gone. In its place, a bold, black title card appeared, the groom's record. A second later, a voice note began to play through the hall's high-end surround sound speakers. It was Chloe's voice, sweet and dripping with a poison that made the guests freeze. Derek, after the wedding day, she will be ruined. That house under her name was paid in full, right? Once it is transferred to you, we can move in together. And then Derek's dry mocking chuckle. What's the rush? Once I get her house, then transfer out her savings, that will make this marriage worth it. The screenshots of Derek's $83,000 online loan application flashed on the screen, followed by the transaction receipt for the Cartier bracelet he had bought for Chloe. Below it was the chemical analysis of the calming soup he had brewed for me last night. The report, stamped by the city's forensic laboratory, was clear. High concentrations of flunitrazepam, rohypnol, and sleep sedatives. The crowd of relatives and friends erupted into a mass of chaotic screaming. Oh my God! He poisoned her. He was planning to steal her house and her savings. And he spent $80,000 on another woman while giving his fiancé a $9 flower bouquet? Derek's mother sat in the front row, her face turning from a pasty white to a deep, suffocating purple. She tried to pull the property deed from her bag to hide it, but Sophie's father, who was a senior detective with the city's commercial fraud division, stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. Mrs. Hale, Detective Thorne said, his voice cold and flat. I'll take that deed back. And you're coming with us to the precinct. No. This is a mistake. My son is a good boy. Your son is a federal criminal, Detective Thorne said, signaling to the two uniformed officers who had just pushed through the double doors of the banquet hall. The officers marched straight into the ring. They didn't look at Chloe, who was currently being loaded onto a medical stretcher by the EMTs. They walked straight to Derek, who was still kneeling on the canvas, his face completely drained of color, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't even stand up. Derek Hale, the officer said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder by poisoning, grand larceny, and financial fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the steel cuffs clicked around his wrists, Derek looked up at me. He looked at my clean, dry hands. He looked at my steady, unblinking eyes and he finally realized that the frail, obedient woman he had spent 5 years treating like a cash cow had turned into an absolute blade. Vivian. He whispered, his voice raw, his lips trembling. The house, the bank loans. The house has already been mortgaged, Derek, I said, my voice quiet and cool, over the sound of the police radios. The $2,600,000 is safe in a private trust under Sophie's name. You won't touch a single steel bar in it. And your online loans? I smiled, a small, dark sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. Since you signed the joint debt agreement last week, those $83,000 are entirely yours. Have fun paying them off from your cell. The double doors of the Grand Marriott's banquet hall were pushed open, letting in the cool, rain-scented wind of the afternoon. I walked out of the hotel, my heavy satin train left behind on the stage, wearing my simple black athletic tank top and compression shorts. Sophie walked beside me, her hand holding mine, her face glowing with a bright, happy smile. Where to, Vivian? She asked. The training base, I said, looking up at the gray clouds that were slowly clearing, letting in the warm, golden light of the spring sun. I need to pay the coach his remaining 40,000. And then? And then, I said, my chest expanding with a deep, clean breath of fresh air. I'm going to live. The winter of my previous life had finally ended, the darkness of the rooftop, washed away by the clean, cold rain of my revenge. I was finally free, and the world before me was absolutely wide open.